right. Thank you so much for joining us, Mickey. We are super excited to talk today, excited to get some of your experience since you are well versed in the space.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've got a bunch of different questions for you today, so we're just going to dive right in. You are in a pretty competitive space. How does your team go about gaining new clients, new partners? What's working for you best right now?
Still kind of getting my feet wet in it, but really relying on the Department of Health and Human Services, through Children and Family Services, as well as domestic violence shelters and just kind of word of mouth.
Awesome, awesome. Word of mouth is always the best place to start, right? Um,
Yes.
for our viewers, Nikki is just now starting out in her newest venture, 6 months in, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Just 6 months.
That's
Yeah.
exciting. Um, Perfect. Well, I know you're still very experienced in other ways, in other roles. So your job is not an easy one. I almost always find that people have a specific, generally personal reason for working in behavioral health. Would you mind sharing yours and telling us kind of how you got in the field?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it after my undergrad. Not a lot of jobs in Nebraska, so I started working in the developmental disabilities field and was thrown into working with a lot of behavioral individuals. And so just kind of, I don't know, it just became a passion and learning, what their behaviors were and how to change those, writing functional behavior assessments. Excellent opportunities because I was in the right place at the right time. So I got to travel the state of Nebraska doing behavior consultations with a psychologist long before there were BCBAs in the state. And Nebraska was always kind of slow to that, and then working in the CPS field, child protection, became engrossed in the domestic violence world and just kind of decided, that that was something that I needed to work on and something needs to change in that field. There's been a lot of lethal violence in the state as well as other states and
Absolutely.
with mental health not being great now for people, it just seems like something needs to change.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, given your experience across developmental disabilities, autism, welfare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how has that kind of breadth of experience shaped your approach to behavior analysis?
I think it gives me a little different perspective than a lot of the new BCBAs that just go in from college. I have 30 or 25 plus years of experience in the developmental disabilities field, working with adults mostly, but also some teenagers and kids. So I think it helps me with my full-time job of working for a company, working with individuals with autism, and working with older kids, not so much the littles. I have quite a few teenagers on my caseload. So I think it's helped in that aspect, as well as just kind of realizing that there's a lot more going on sometimes in the household, and kind of looking for that, just having that trauma informed lens.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, things are more complex than
Yes,
often we realize.
yes.
So to kind of dig deeper on that, so the domestic violence functional assessment that you created looks at more than just physical harm within the home. And what inspired you to address the, should we say, like the less visible layers of coercive control?
Well, I think it goes by personal experience. I think that not realizing that you're in that kind of a relationship is what inspired me. And many women, when I was working in the CPS field, had no clue. He controls the finances, or he's keeping track of me day by day, or he's threatening me because I've, asked for a divorce. That's not okay. And so I think it's just really education. And I have some education type things that I would like to do in schools, just because I think we have to start like from the ground up. I don't think a lot of kids even realize that, when he's making you feel guilty for wanting to go to your Christmas thing, or making you feel guilty because you want to stay home with your mom and dad, that's not okay. That's coercion. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. That's not love, which I think a lot of kids think it is,
Yeah.
but that's actually being coercive and making you feel guilty for something that is okay to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's okay to have your own life and to be your
Yes, it
own.
is.
Absolutely.
Definitely. That autonomy is so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you balance clinical work, teaching, and advocacy, as you kind of started to allude to just now. What's your secret for keeping each role impactful without losing sight of kind of the larger, the bigger picture?
Well, I think I'd like to know the secret. I think finding balance is the key. Not sure I've quite found the balance yet. Seems like I'm working a lot more on my full-time job than this business, but you have inspired me to start digging deeper. So I think it's just really talking to people. I think it's just getting out there, making sure that people know that I'm there. I think another thing that hinders my business is the fact that a lot of women that are going through domestic violence and have realized it are
Mm,
also probably afraid to leave. And when you, as we know, when you file a protection order, you are in the most danger in that 24 to 48 hours.
yeah.
So it's really finding some kind of tool that will make them feel safe and letting them know that they have a voice with me. Originally, when I created the domestic violence functional assessment, my idea was to get both sides of the story, to get his side as well. But I think now that, I've kind of been thinking about it, thinking about things as I'm preparing for this podcast, I'm thinking I'm just going to go for the survivor side. I think that women, most typically women, some men, need a document that I believe would help them to tell their story. Because sometimes it's just really hard to wrap your head around like what's really going on in that relationship. And it does happen to men. And I'm doing functional behavior assessment right now for a man that has been going through coercive control for 30 years.
Absolutely.
And so just making those connections, I think, is really important.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I definitely agree. I think the survivors almost always struggle to find their voice because
Yes.
of what they've gone through, because of their life experience.
Yeah, and I think it's not only like I feel in danger, I don't feel safe. I think it's also shame.
Mm,
You've been going through this for 20 years or 15 or even 5. It doesn't matter how long, but like you've been beat down, he's shaming you. It's all your fault. It's your fault that this is happening.
mm,
Um, and then you're just kind of embarrassed, embarrassed that you've let this go on, embarrassed. And there shouldn't be shame. This is not something that you chose. This is not something that anybody chooses. And it happens so slowly sometimes that you don't even realize that it's occurring
yeah,
until it becomes like a dangerous situation. And then you can't say something because he's isolated you and
absolutely.
taken all the money and just, threatened the kids or the pets or your family or
Mm,
you.
yeah, yeah. Well, my sister founded a nonprofit specifically focused on helping survivors of domestic violence,
Oh,
and
good.
one of the things that she always said is, well, that I really like that she said that, I'm just going to steal it and say it myself, is that in our culture, we have such a mentality of take care of yourself, handle it yourself,
Yes.
be self reliant, be self confident, all of those things, that it makes it harder for survivors in America than it does in a lot of countries that are okay with relying on a community and having support and all of those things. That independence is sometimes a double edged sword.
Yes. And pride. Sometimes I think it's just really hard to ask for help or to admit that you need help. I'm a strong, independent woman, so I can get through this. I can figure it out, but not always the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're strong and independent generally, maybe, right? But you need help in these areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, awesome. Well, so last question. As you're continuing to grow, what do you anticipate are going to be some of the largest challenges for you as you um, grow this kind of side job and turn it into a larger business and start growing a team? What are some of the challenges you're anticipating?
I think really just attempting to find survivors that are willing to talk to me, and will, find safety in talking to me. I think they need to know what the tool can do for them, and it can help them, not only like in a CPS case, but also just in general in a custody case, so that they can get their story out and that it is in, plain terms so that the court can read it and people will hopefully help to understand their story. I know a lot of people say, why did she stay? Why did she stay? Well, I want to tell that story because there's so much more behind it than she just chose to stay. It wasn't a choice.
Yep, almost always things are more complex than they look on the outside.
Yes, they are.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mickey. We really appreciate it. We appreciate some of the insights you just shared, and we also appreciate the work that you're doing in your community. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.